It is now 7:01, and I am reconvening to open session and calling to order the regular Board of Education meeting for Indian Prairie School District 204 on Monday, September 11th, 2023. Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Gentz. Here. Ms. Fosdick. Ms. Jane. Here. Ms. Donahue.
Here.
Ms. Deming. Present. Mr. Rising.
Here.
Mr. Karubis.
We have a quorum. Ms. Deming, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a hearing at 7:05. So I think we'll take up a couple of our board salutes. So Ms. Gantz.
District 204 students participate in Summer Springboard Program. The board salutes the District 204 staff who partnered with College of DuPage, Edward Elmhurst Health, Kids Matter, and Naperville 203 to provide a summer learning opportunity for over 60 IPSD students in healthcare-related fields through the Summer Springboard Program. 46 students participated in the healthcare course and were certified in youth mental health first aid, heard guest speakers from various healthcare organizations, and participated in job shadowing opportunities, experimental learning, and field experiences in mental and behavioral health. 17 students participated in the Pharmacy Tech program, which is designed to provide students with the knowledge and skills necessary to work in various pharmacy settings and practical experiences required to become ready to work as a pharmacy technician. Congratulations to all involved.
Mr. Rising.
District 204 Visual Arts Program collaborates with the City of Naperville. The board salutes the Indian Prairie Visual Arts Program for their public art displays created in collaboration with the City of Naperville. The artwork of 29 Indian Prairie students was selected at last year's Fine Arts Festival and turned into light post banners, which are now on display along 95th Street between Route 59 and Book Road. We encourage the community members to view the results of this collaboration, which will be on display through October. Additionally, 6th Street light controller boxes along 95th Street have been wrapped in student artwork from Neco Valley High School. These pieces are at ground level and are permanent installations. Congratulations to the students and teachers, and thank you, City of Naperville, who are part of this community collaboration.
Let's give them applause. All right, we have to wait officially 1 more minute until we have our public hearing. Right. Oh, okay, we are there. So I am calling to order a public hearing for the 2024 fiscal year budget. I need a motion and a second. Oops, so Matt. Are you ready? Okay. We have no public comment on this. Do we need a motion and a second?
No, just to close, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To close, yeah.
All right. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. Tonight is the final step in adopting our legal budget for the 2023-2024 school year. I presented the tentative budget at the July 17th Board of Education meeting. The tentative budget was a natural extension of forecast and budget presentations made at the February 27th and May 1st board meetings. The school district budget is a year-round process led by the business office, but also dependent on the feedback of work and leaders throughout the district. I want to thank the Board of Education and District Administration for their support throughout the budget process. Consistent with the requirements of the State Board of Education, the budget was posted on the district's website for 30 days, and a public notice was published in both the Naperville Sun and Daily Herald newspapers, noting tonight's hearing. The business office received no public feedback on the budget, and as Board President just mentioned, we have nobody signed up for public comment this evening. As such, tonight's budget is presented with no changes from the tentative budget presented in July. Tonight, I have a brief presentation that will be a summary of the 2023-2024 budget and review items previously covered at the February, May, and July meetings. So we'll quickly cover the 2023-2024 budget priority areas, the operating budget, our non-operating budget. We'll briefly look at some comparable district benchmarking, and then cover the final steps needed to adopt the budget this evening. We had 4 budget priorities as we started this year's budget. The first was to pass a balanced and sustainable budget that would protect the assets of the taxpayers while also providing sufficient resources to educate our students. We were able to address some targeted staffing increases. We are increasing staffing by approximately 20 FTE this year through the budget process. We've also supported curriculum review and our student resource refresh, which was first discussed with the board in December 2022. The primary investment this year is in our new elementary early literacy curriculum, which is over $3.2 million investment. Then our final priority was to continue capital investment on our buildings and facilities. Our 2024 operating budget includes 6 funds. These funds were presented at the July meeting. The budget is balanced across all 6 funds, and it does maintain sufficient reserves. I'll point to the number in the bottom right corner, which shows that our fund balance at the end of this budget is projected to be 35.7% of revenues. This is above the 25% requirement that the State Board of Education has, and is the primary driver of the district's recognition status. The highest financial status is B awards to school districts. Just looking at the breakdown of our significant revenues, property taxes continues to be the most significant revenue source at 76% of total revenues. State revenue, both the evidence-based funding and other state revenues, combines for just 14% of our revenues. That percentage continues to decline despite the state's use of the evidence-based funding formula and despite continued statewide investment into evidence-based funding. And we discussed quite at length at the May budget presentation some of the drivers of that, that amount slowly declining. Looking to expenditures, our budget this evening reflects all major union agreements, significant contracts, and all known obligations of the district. We have increased budgets across schools and departments. As mentioned, we're increasing FTE by approximately 20 for this year, and that's really to address both rising costs related to the general inflationary environment and to continue to support our budget priorities. Moving on to our non-operating funds budget, these numbers have not changed since we first presented them back in February. The district maintains 2 non-operating funds. The first is our bond and interest fund, and the second is our capital projects fund. When you kind of look at these budgets together, we have both a long-term opportunity and a long-term challenge when it comes to the overall financial position of the district. The opportunity is that we are starting to see declining bond payments, with our final bond payment due in December 2026. At that time, the district will no longer have any outstanding bonds related to the significant building improvements and building investment we made during the 90s and early 2000s. The long-term challenge really comes to funding the next generation of capital expenditures. So while we have been able to invest in our facilities with this non-operating capital projects fund shown here, these funds, we have about 1.5 to 2 years left of those funds, and then we will need to find a new funding source to continue to invest in our facilities. Our kind of building, our building investments that we've made both this year and what we're planning for next year, a little bit more detail tonight in one of our discussion items. As mentioned, we just want to quickly show some comparable district analysis. This is the expense per pupil of Indian Prairie compared with the state average and our 7 other comparable districts. Consistent for the last, for many years, almost since the start of the district, Indian Prairie continues to have the lowest expense per pupil among our 8 comparable districts, as well as being the only of our 8 comparable districts below the statewide average. Again, you can see we're just about $1,000 below the state average in spending per pupil. If you want to kind of gross that up, that would be about $24 million to the total budget that we're short compared to the statewide average. And if you compare with Naperville 203, our nearest neighbor in those 8 comparable districts, we're about $86 million short of what they have on a per pupil basis. And again, that's being over $3,000 per pupil below their operating expense per pupil. So with that said, as mentioned, that's a quick summary of really 3 pretty comprehensive discussions we've had throughout this budget process. So the final steps to adopt this budget is really just a board approval later in tonight's agenda. Myself and the rest of our business office will then complete all required budget filings by the September 30th deadline. So again, we are passing this budget within the deadline set by the State Board of Education. And then listed here is really just a reminder that our work really never stops, and we're already starting to plan for our next budget cycle. We have several items coming before you in November and December related to our annual property tax levy, as well as the master facility plan work that we're very excited to present and been working hard on over the past year. And then I will be back with the board, we're probably starting in February, looking at our fiscal 2025 budget. So with that, I am open to any questions.
So I need a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Can I ask a question?
You want, we'll
Or do you
have
wanna save it?
discussion after.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Then I'll move that, that we close the 2024 fiscal year budget hearing.
A second.
Now, is there any discussion?
Yes, just really quick, Matt, approximately as defined by the state, what percentage of adequate funding is 204?
Sure. So we talked a lot at the May meeting about evidence-based funding. The district last year was at 84% evidence-based funding. We did tick up slightly to 85% for this budget year, the 23-24 budget year. Again, that obviously falls about 15% short of 100. And again, we're the only district of our 8 comparable districts that's even under 90%, with most of those districts being 100% or above.
And then if you could go to the budget sheet with actually the different, the numbers, there you go. So we're looking at approximately a $572,000 excess, about a $500,000 excess on a $420 million budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we were able to balance our budget by about a $500,000 on $420 million while being 15% underfunded as a school district.
That's correct.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you so much for your work.
Mr. Karubis, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a comment directed at Matt, slide 8 on the operating expense per pupil. What's remarkable about this slide is that it shows we are, to some of our comparable districts, funded 20, 30% less than they are. And yet, if you were to put our test scores or our teacher retention or satisfaction, we are nowhere near 20 to 30% less than these comparable districts. So the remarkable part about slide 8 is when you combine the budget aspects with our performance aspects, that we are still performing at a high level, even though we are using less funds on a per pupil basis to do so.
Any other discussion?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Matt, thank you so much for what you continue to share with us. Just a quick, I know we've been doing a facility review, had a facility review, and just can you just share a little bit from a budgetary standpoint, operations and what we look like in that area, please?
Sure. So we knew going into that master facility project that we are likely going to find that we have some significant deferred maintenance needs. A majority of our facilities were built in the 1990s. I always use 1997 as kind of the midpoint in my own mind. So that's now many of our facilities are 26 years old. If you use that number, I think the actual average age of our building is about 31 years. We, as a result of some budgetary challenges, starting with the Great Recession, 08-09, and some of the state challenges that came shortly after, we had a fairly significant period where we really didn't invest in our facilities. So we've taken the opportunity first over the last couple years to start getting caught up. Again, we've been able to rely primarily on this non-operating capital projects fund and some one-time revenues and some reserves the board has designated for capital projects to really start that work. And that's what we're going to present a little later this evening as one of our discussion items, is really the work we've been able to do both this last year and the summer of '23, as well as what we hope to do next summer. But the intention of that work is really to be a stopgap measure until we can really get running on our master facility plan. And so we are in the final stages of developing that plan. Again, we're planning on presenting that to the board at the November 20th meeting. We've started some community engagement nights. Actually, last week was our first to really start getting the community feedback on that document plan. And then once that plan's adopted, hopefully by the end of the year, we will start looking at how we can fund that plan. And again, we'll sort of be starting to run low a little bit on this current capital projects fund, and so that'll be the next step of the project, is to really look at long-term funding options for that work.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure that the public is aware that we are looking at it. We're having the conversations, but there's some decisions that obviously are going to have to be made, because we had great growth early on, and now it's time for us to make sure that those facilities are, of course, safety's always been our issue, but doing what we need to bring those, make sure they stay where they should be.
Yeah, and just to confirm that, our intention is for that master facility project to be very, very comprehensive. And so we have looked at not just some of the deferred maintenance needs that are maybe more related to the infrastructure or the building envelope, but we've also looked at safety and security. Environmental sustainability is going to become an increasingly important part of our facility plan, as well as talking about the fun stuff, making sure that our educational environments, our learning environments are really exciting, innovative places for students to learn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. We've had multiple discussions about the budget over the past few months, so important topic, critical topic for us, and thank you for leading the efforts to make sure that we have a balanced budget. And again, as Mr. Rising pointed out, and we repeatedly brought up, the lack of funding to get us to 100% is something that we have to deal with, and I think we do an excellent job, so thank you very much for that. So Jeannie, will you now call the roll?
Mr. Rising.
Yes.
Ms. Gentz.
Yes.
Mr. Karubis.
To close the hearing, Justin.
Closing the public
Closing the
hearing.
hearing.
We're close.
Closing the public hearing.
Ms. Deming.
Aye.
Ms. Donahue.
Aye.
Ms. Jane.
Yes.
The motion passes. Okay. Now it is time for our student representative report from Rishvant Siraj from Mattia Valley High School. Welcome.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rishvant Siraj, and I'm the Executive Board Representative from Mattia Valley High School. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you all today. First, let's get started with some general updates. So overall, a great start to the school year. We've received a lot of feedback about the positive culture and atmosphere around the school. Freshman orientation was a huge success with over 500 students from the class of 27 attending the event. Mattia Valley Athletic Boosters hosted a great Mattia Mania Friday before the school started, and we raised funds to support the athletics moving forward. Senior Sunrise was a great success on the first Mustang Friday in the stadium. The first time that we used the stadium to kick off the senior year was a great event. Senior Application Night was a huge success, and we want to say a big thank you to our guidance department for hosting the senior families and leading the important event. On September 5th, on our school improvement day, we celebrated our newly tenured staff and organized an education camp. It was a great day for the Mattia staff to learn from each other on how we can continue to support and grow our Mustang Nation. Lastly, we hosted a very successful curriculum night on Thursday, September the 7th, and Mattia plans on sending out staff videos next week for those who couldn't be in person for the event. Next up, our fine arts. This week on September 14th, Mattia Valley will have its activity fair where students can sign up for clubs that they're interested in. Out of the 95 clubs and activities, 50 will be represented at the activity fair. And to aid with the selection of the clubs for students, Mattia has introduced Mustang Trails, which allows students to find the topics and paths that align with them the best. We have a total of 7 trails, which include agriculture and natural sciences, art and communication, finance and business services, health and human services, human and public services, information technology, and manufacturing, engineering, and trades. With the vast clubs and resources at hand, we hope that students will find their trail and find their people. The Marching Mustangs performed during the halftime show at Saturday's Northwestern University football game. So overall, an amazing performance from our Fine Arts Division, and we can't wait to see what our talented Mustangs will do next. Next up, our athletics department. Mattia Valley Athletics is in Operation Go Go Mustangs. All sports have officially started their season in the week of August 21st, while the Gold program's got a head start. Girls swim won their first duel at home versus Bennett and look forward to a good season. Our girls cross country took first in the Aurora City meet at both varsity and junior varsity levels, while our boys finished second under the new head coach, Ruben Nino. Our girls volleyball team took second this past week at Willowbrook and are looking to be a force to be reckoned with. Both boys and girls golf have had a strong start at the invites, with girls having a great conference win against Waubonsie Valley High School. From the boys, Kyler Butcher finished top 5 at several invites and set a new school record by scoring a 68 on his scorecard. Our very own head boys soccer coach, Josh Robinson, made an appearance on ABC News Labor Day and highlighted the body arm attorney and the ways that we are giving back to the community. Being young in the season, we've seen a lot of success across our programs and in areas which we can build on top of. So many great things occurring across the board, and this is just a snapshot of Mattia Valley's successes and limitless potential. That's all for the September board report. Thank you so much for your time. Stay safe, and go, go Mustangs.
Thank you. Okay, it is now time for public comment, and 60 minutes is allowed for public comment. Each person is limited to 3 minutes. When addressing the board, we ask that you respect the confidentiality and safety of our students and school district personnel. We also ask that those addressing the board be cognizant that this is an open meeting and is available to all age groups, and as such, ask that you consider who the audience members are this evening and keep comments age appropriate. Public comment represents the voice and opinion of the speaker. There will be no feedback from the board members during the meeting, but follow-up will be provided by an administrator as appropriate. Although this is not required, it is helpful for the board to know whether the comments and concerns we are hearing are being raised by residents. So we ask that you state if you live in the district and if you currently have children in our schools. So we have 2 public speakers tonight. The first is Anna Buchanaver. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Anna Buchnauer. I'm a senior and 2-year varsity starter on Waubonsie's tennis team. I have been on the team for all 4 years of high school. In fact, it was the first thing I got involved in during our remote freshman year. Over the years, tennis has become one of my favorite parts of high school. It has given me a support system of friends and coaches who encourage and cheer me on through everything, truly showing me what the Warrior culture is all about. Ultimately, it has given me a place and an identity in school. We wanted to come here today to thank you all for everything you have done to provide us with new courts this season. We appreciate your efforts and financial contribution because we know how many other schools have needs that this district supports. You have enabled us to keep pushing ourselves and achieving great things. We're looking forward to finishing out a great season. Thank you, and go Warriors.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Alicia Smith.
Hello, I am a former student, Gregory Middle School in Waubonsee. I taught at Kendall and Georgetown. I currently live in the Gombert neighborhood, and that's where my niece and nephews go to school. You can ask any parent what they want for their child's school, and the answer would be the same. Whether privileged or marginalized, homeowner or renter, longtime resident or new to the area, if you ask a parent, they will say, I want my child to go to a good school. That is your number one priority as a school board member and as an administrator, to make sure that every child in your district is able to attend a good school. But you all are not doing the job that parents have asked of you. 204 schools have great teachers and a great community, but 4 204 schools are below the state average in state testing: Georgetown, Longwood, McCarty, and Fisher. You all created these conditions when you designed boundaries that gave these schools and Gombert low-income populations way above the district average. Naperville 203 has a similar low-income average to 204, yet they do not have a single school that falls below the state average in state testing. They also do not have a single school that has low-income populations doubled or tripled the district average. A family moving into Naperville 203 can choose any home or apartment and know that their child will go to a good school. In 204, whether or not your child goes to a good school depends on their zip code. It is not a privilege that all students get to experience. NEQA's niche rating is built on these inequities because not a single one of the district's title schools feed into NEQA. 204 has 2 school-wide title schools with such high percentage of low-income students that they receive special federal funding: Longwood, which feeds into Metea, and Georgetown, which feeds into Waubonsee. Naperville 203 does not have a single school-wide title school. They do not create schools with such high concentrations of low-income students. The administration school board created the boundaries that produce these inequities. We want equity for Georgetown, Longwood, McCarty, Gombert, and Fisher. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to our consent agenda and superintendent report. We will start with the superintendent report. Dr. Talley.
Thank you, Ms. Donahue, members of the Board of Ed and the Indian Prairie community. I must start my comments with sad news. Recently, we learned of the passing of Waubonsee warrior Caleb Walker Smith. He would have been a junior this year. He was often found attending the football games. He led the school's GSA and helped to create anti-bullying initiatives and supporting the homeless. May his family know how much he was part of our Indian Prairie family. I also need to share the news of the passing of former Board of Education member, Mr. Owen Warnick, for whom Owen Elementary is named. He was the longest-serving member of the Board of Education, having served 21 years, and was board president for 4 of those 21 years. He was a strong advocate for our school district and an invaluable member of our community. Today is also the sad anniversary of 9/11. 22 years ago, our country was attacked on American soil and nearly 3,000 people died in New York City, at the Pentagon in Northern Virginia, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. At the time, I was principal in New York, and one of my school parents, a firefighter and PTA treasurer, died at the World Trade Center. It is a day that we should never forget, and a day that we remember those who died. For Caleb, Mr. Warnick, and in remembrance of 9/11, I ask that we take a moment of silence. Thank you. Today marks the 11th day of school. We have had a very good opening this school year. Though we started on the hottest day of the year, we were able to have a complete first day of school in all of our buildings. A big thanks to our bus drivers from First Student who worked that first day. Thanks to our parent volunteers who helped at schools with arrival of students. We always want a smooth beginning, and I'm glad we were able to realize such an opening. There is a myriad of moving parts to opening the school year. You always want those parts to work together like a Swiss watch. To our administrators, our staff, our parents, to everybody, I say thank you for making it all work like clockwork. I want to celebrate our 3 comprehensive high schools for the latest U.S. News and World Report rankings. Neuqua Valley, Metea Valley, and Waubonsee Valley have all been ranked within the top 50 in Illinois. We applaud the work of the staff and students for the success of these 3 high schools. We're in the process of putting together a comprehensive master facility plan, as mentioned earlier, as part of our budget hearing. We are working with White & Company on this plan. They've done school visits, and we are now in the process of holding community engagement nights. We had our first one last Wednesday at Waubonsee. During the night, White & Company shared what they are doing and gathered information from the community members who attended. Later in November, a presentation will be made to the Board of Ed about the plan. Finally, the U.S. observes National Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15th to October 15th by celebrating the histories, cultures, and contributions of individuals whose ancestors came from Mexico, the Caribbean, Central and South America, and Spain. Our schools, in their own way, will be celebrating this month and spotlighting the contribution made by those with Hispanic heritage. Knowing that we have a lot to discuss tonight in our presentations, I'll now end my comments, and I'll turn it back to you, Ms. Donahue.
Thank you. All right, next we move to our consent agenda items. I need a motion for approval of consent agenda items D through L.
I move to approve consent agenda items D through L.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
and Ms. Gentz,
Yes.
and Lori Donahue, please.
Yes. Yes, the motion passes. All right, next we move to our action items. I need a motion and a second to approve the 2024 fiscal year budget as presented.
Move that the Board of Education approve the fiscal year 2024 budget as presented.
I second.
Any other discussion since we discussed this a little bit? Okay, Jeannie, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Gentz,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
and Mr. Karubis.
Motion passes. Now I need a motion and a second to approve the Memorandum of Understanding with the Indian Prairie Education Foundation as presented.
I move to approve the memorandum of understanding with the Indian Prairie Educational Foundation as presented.
A second.
Any discussion? We have a valuable partnership with IPEF and the district, and I think the memorandum is a good mechanism of making sure that it's fully documented and supported.
And thanks should also go to the executive director. I believe she has a staff member and all the volunteer board members that serve on behalf of IPEF. They do tremendous work for our district and funding a lot of the projects that we have as a district.
Okay. All right, Jeannie, will you call the roll?
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Gentz,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis.
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, moving right along. I need a motion and a second to approve the Consortium of State School Boards Association Conference Expense Pre-Approval as presented.
I'll make a motion that the Board of Education approve the 2024 Consortium of School Board Association Annual Conference Expense Proposal as presented.
I second.
Any discussion?
Is he right?
This is for our board members to attend US-wide School Board Association conference and get additional education, training, ideas. So it's always appreciated when our board members agree to travel and represent and bring back information that helps our board be better. So thank you.
And I'll just add to that too, just so the community knows that we do attend a national conference in Illinois, but oftentimes we're the largest or one of the largest districts, and we have done or tried or accomplished or already have in place a lot of the things that we hear at the state conference, and we kind of serve as mentors and education of other boards of education at the state level. What our board really gets out of these national conferences is things that boards of education, school districts are doing across the country, where we can learn and bring some of those things back. And we have implemented dozens of those in my time as a board member, so it is extremely valuable for our board to, at least some of our representatives, to go there and bring some of those ideas back.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Rising. I think our board has offered a session at the Illinois board many years in a row, and including this year, we'll have one on mental health. So you're right that we are looked at as a leading board and administration and district in the state. So thank you. All right, Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rising,
Yes.
Ms. Deming,
Aye.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes.
Ms. Gentz,
Yes.
Ms. Jane.
Yes.
The motion passes. I now need a motion and a second to approve the superintendent contract with Dr. Adrian Talley for the period of July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2026 as presented.
I move that the Board of Education approve the superintendent contract with Dr. Adrian Talley for the period from July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2026 as presented.
I second.
Any discussion? I think we're moving to make sure Dr. Talley is here through the June of 2026. I think it's pretty obvious, but just in case. All right, Jeannie, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Jane,
Yes.
Ms. Gentz,
Yes.
Mr. Karubis,
Yes.
Ms. Donahue,
Yes,
Ms. Deming, Mr. Rising.
Yes.
the motion passes. Congratulations, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we will now have a presentation from Mr. Matt Shipley and Mr. Ron Johnson regarding transportation update.
Thought that last agenda item was going to become a roast.
I was holding back, yeah.
I'll pay for that tomorrow.
You have that tie on. It doesn't get you out of trouble.
I thought it was a shield of protection.
All right. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. Tonight, myself and our Director of Support Services, Ron Johnson, are here to present a transportation update. We were last in front of the Board of Education in April of 2022. That was an update that was primarily focused on our transportation response to our new boundaries and some of the enrollment work we did in the fall of 2021, and that impact on transportation. So tonight's agenda, we will start with just some transportation fast facts. That includes reviewing our transportation budget and how that budget is it comes to be and how it's paid for, the combination of revenue sources that covers our costs. We're going to have a pretty significant discussion on our serious hazard evaluation process and schedule. This has been a focus area over the last year of our transportation department, and so Ron will update the board on how that process kind of started and what really goes into that hazard evaluation. We'll then cover a few other transportation initiatives we've worked on over the past year, as well as what we have sort of on deck for this fiscal year 2024, and then we will both be available for any questions. Just starting again with some of those fast facts or the data behind our transportation operation. As the board knows, we rely on two outsourced providers for our transportation services, being First Student and Rich Lee. First Student employs over 230 drivers and covers just short of 1,100 daily routes for us. I'll mention that, as you can see, the number of routes greatly exceeds the number of drivers. This means we operate on a tiered system. So most of our buses in the morning or afternoon are running 2 or 3 tiers, meaning that they are doing an initial drop of high school students, then moving on to a middle school set of routes, and then an elementary set. So that's part of the reason that when we talk about our start times or why our high school starts maybe earlier than we'd like or elementary starts a little later, that's really one of the key drivers of that is that tiered route structure. In total, we drive over 2.5 million miles and have 16,723 students eligible for transportation. That's just over 64% of our student population. Rich Lee Vans is a smaller operation, but really an important asset to the district as well. And they handle primarily our McKinney-Vento transportation, or our students that qualify under some of the homeless legislation or are in unstable living situations. So as you can see, the number of students covered by that varies fairly significantly during the school year. We sometimes are as few as 30, but also sometimes over 100. And that really reflects that uncertainty or the ebb and flow of that transportation. So having Rich Lee sort of handle that, they're using primarily transportation vans. They're able to scale up quicker, scale down quicker as needed to really make sure we're meeting the needs of those students. Across our transportation network last year, we accomplished a 93.2% on-time percentage. If you do expand that slightly to give us a little bit of a 5-minute buffer, we'd be up to 97.2%. So our goal has been 95%. We fell just a little short of that. But again, that shows how critical that sort of 5-minute window is and does reflect that when given a little bit of buffer time, we are meeting our 95% goal. And then finally, the annual budget that we just passed this evening is for $26.5 million dedicated towards transportation this year. And the funding for that's pretty close to an even split between state revenue and then local property taxes.
So as Mr. Shipley was saying, this is what our trend looks like throughout the year for the past 3 years. As you can see, as we get into some of the more inclement weather, we see this large dip. But there's an appendix slide to this presentation that if we add that 5 minutes, it levels out. That's how critical 5 minutes is in my world each morning and each afternoon. If there's a small traffic accident on one of the major arterial roads like Ogden, Eola, Route 59, 75th Street, that can gridlock an area and really push us back in, whether it's in the morning or afternoon. The good thing is we have tools available for the schools that we'll talk about in a little bit. Parents with My Stop can see ETAs and when the buses are coming to their stops. But this shows how critical that each month is as we operate in the warmer months or with no inclement weather. It's fairly steady, closer to our 95% goal.
So as mentioned, the last time we really focused on transportation from the board, it related to our efforts to implement new boundaries for the 22-23 school year. In front of you here is some data that shows the impact to our transportation network as a result of those reboundary efforts. As part of the boundary process, you may remember transportation wasn't a primary consideration that we asked our community and then ultimately administration and the board to consider, but it was a secondary impact that we asked to consider. And as you can see, we decreased annual miles traveled by just short of 300,000. That relates to about 35 to 36,000 gallons of fuel that we were able to save each year, and about 161,000 in dollars of fuel savings. In addition to that fuel cost, there's also other costs and other savings related to that. So that does decrease the amount of routes, the amount of drivers, and just other costs associated with our transportation system. So overall, we believe that from the transportation aspect, this reboundary work was a success for us, especially as Ron just mentioned, when dealing with some of the challenges for on-time performance, some of the challenges we've had facing bus driver shortages over the past year. Being able to cut miles driven by just over 10% was a significant accomplishment that really brought stability to the operation over the last year.
And as Mr. Shipley was talking about on an earlier slide, with the amount of drivers that we currently are putting on the road, the boundaries also reduce the amount of time students are on buses, so we're not traveling as far away from the school of attendance as we were prior to this.
So just moving on to kind of give the high-level approach to the transportation budget. So again, we mentioned that it's just over $26.5 million for the current year. First student represents the overwhelming majority of that expense at $23.2 million. And again, that's all our regular and special education routes. The Richley routes is a smaller portion of that with about $1.3 million. Our activities and athletic charters, costs that go towards extracurricular activities are also included in that budget, as well as some of the district support. So just fuel costs and some other support, district administration costs associated with the transportation program. Again, the revenues that cover that, state revenues represent about $12.3 million, and then local property taxes or local fund balance is a slightly larger portion of that at $14.2. So that represents about a 45% split for state and a 55% split for local revenue. To be eligible for that state reimbursement, the district is required to follow the eligible transportation service expenses as defined by the State Board of Education. That's detailed in what's known as the annual pupil transportation claim. And it's an extremely detailed set of instructions and procedures that we must follow to qualify or be eligible for that state reimbursement. So if we do provide transportation that's found to be ineligible or not in line with the state guidance, we do not receive that state portion. We would then be liable as a district for 100% of that transportation funds, and ultimately that would take funds out of the classroom or out of other purposes and redirect it towards transportation. State reimbursement is subject to audit. We receive an audit periodically. It's generally on a 5 to 7 year audit cycle. And the last audit we received associated with the reimbursement was in 2020. At that time, we received a clean audit opinion. I believe we didn't have to return any money, but we were sort of given a little bit of a warning or a request by the state auditor to really go back and update our safety hazard findings. So safety hazards aren't required to be looked at annually, but in our case, there were a lot of hazards that had been set up in the early 1990s, mid-1990s, maybe when some schools were initially built, and it hadn't been reviewed since then. And so there was a need to periodically review those, review traffic counts, review if construction has changed the dynamics of that neighborhood. And so that's really what Ron and his team has worked on, both with the boundary study and now moving into just reviewing some that were already established. And Ron's going to go into a little bit more detail on that process.
Yeah, just a couple more things to note on this. When you look at the state claim, it's based on previous year expenses. So if you look at the this year expenses in our budget, we're looking at a 14.5% increase in expenditures for first student, for example. But the reimbursement is based on last year expenses. So that's why you kind of tap into fund balance and local property taxes, and then you catch up in the next year. The way the reimbursement works at the state level is during the budget process for the state is they allocate a portion of funding for pupil transportation for school districts. And it doesn't necessarily match the increase in expenditures across every school district in the state. So we may see a 14.5%, where another district may see 30%, which is directly tied to the labor rates, the wages that we're paying drivers, the increase in costs in equipment, the increase in costs in fuel. It's more tied to the CPI increase versus the real aspects of the expenses and those increases. So you really rely on tapping into the fund balance that you've built up over several years, which is why it's critical that we follow eligible versus non-eligible expenses so we can get the most bang back from that pot of money that they allocate. The other piece is when we looked at the audit, one of the bigger components from the auditors was that we didn't have a strong opinion or a deficiency noted because we were already going through the process of looking at some of these larger areas, and he understood it took time. One person doing it, it's going to take several years to complete. So on that, we'll get into serious safety hazards and what those mean. Some of the evaluations that I've been completing over the past 6 years. COVID took a little bit of a gap time with that, so we took a little bit of a hiatus on doing them, but now we're back in the full swing. So what is a serious safety hazard and how it's defined? It's defined for us by statute in the Illinois Department of Transportation. These aren't Ron Johnson rules or Indian Prairie rules. We don't just make up the criteria. It's very specific in how the criteria must be evaluated, and it's point-based. So you take a data point, you look it up in a table, and there's a point value, and you add up those point values, and it creates a serious safety hazard or not. So as long as you're trained and you know exactly how to take these measurements and gather that data, it's a very clean, concise, consistent audit across every area of the district that you're evaluating. So it doesn't matter which street, which crossing, which roadway, which walkway, the criteria stays the same. Okay? As I said, this determination of what is a serious safety hazard is defined by the Illinois Department of Transportation. They created a serious safety hazard guidelines. The statute says we must use that to define a serious safety hazard and all the criteria that's specified. These guidelines identify the most relevant factors and assign the more higher point values to them, like age of the student or the pedestrian, and then some of the lower values, like the width of the roadway, type of roadway, and type of walk path, and those types of criteria. There's four types of main hazards that we're going to discuss here in an upcoming slide. If there's a single hazard, a student has to cross one roadway, for example. If the hazard points for crossing that one roadway is 12, it creates a initial determination by myself that we submit to the Illinois Department of Transportation for them to review and assess and approve. And if there's combination hazards, more than one type of hazard, so let's just say you have to cross two roadways, you take and combine those, and it would be 20 points for that combined hazard. So we'll get a little bit more into this. I'm going to try to stay as high macro because I can get extremely in the weeds and go down a rabbit hole with this because there's a lot of data points and criteria and sub-criteria and sub-requirements, but I'm not going to try to spend midnight with you guys tonight talking about them. Okay, so as I said, not every street corner is alike. There's various types of roadways, types of traffic control devices, but the factors are going to be present in most serious situations. So volume of vehicles, speed of vehicles, age of the pupil, and the exposure to the traffic. So when you're talking about a serious safety hazard, you're talking about two main components. You're talking about a vehicle and a pedestrian. And when those two are in the roadway together is what can create a serious safety hazard. So we're evaluating how safe is the pedestrian from the vehicle traffic in various types of hazardous situations. As I stated in a previous slide, the age of the pupils is considered. Older age reflects both mental and physical maturity and the ability to deal with hazardous situations. When I talk to parents about this, I give the example of my children when we're playing in the driveway, right? My kindergartner, if a ball's rolling down the driveway, they dart out in the traffic. They're very unpredictable. And my fifth grader, who's 11 years old, knows not to do that. So the most point values are available to the age of the pupil. Prior to 2001, there were more than two categories. Right now there's two categories. There's a K through 8 category and a 9 through 12. And when I talk to parents about that, they say, so are we treating kindergartners like 8th graders? And it's actually the reverse. We are saying that in a previous determination for a hazard, there was 5 points for kindergartners. We are now giving 5 points for 8th graders, where previously they only had 3. So they made it easier to meet the criteria for a serious safety hazard and submit to IDOT for approval in 2001. Some of these factors are going to be present, as I stated before. There is a new serious safety hazard that came on board about 3 years ago through legislation. It's a serious safety hazard for a course of criminal activity. We have none in 204, but this is not This evaluation is not conducted by the school district. If we're ever petitioned by a parent, we turn it over to law enforcement, and they have a system that they have to log into and put information in, and then submit it to ISB on our behalf. So let's talk about the 4 types of serious safety hazards. So the first one is walking along a roadway. And some of these are pretty obvious when you think of what does that mean. So there's a sidewalk or a walk path that we're walking on that is off of the roadway, okay? So if you look at the picture on the left, that's a shoulder, and the shoulder can be either a paved shoulder, like what you would see on a highway, or it can be an unearthed shoulder, like you would see when you're driving down Montgomery. You'll see just a wide parkway, but that's classified as a shoulder. Or it could be behind a curb or a ditch. When you think of a ditch, you're thinking water retention and water runoff, more than just a slope. You're looking at something a few feet in the ground. Or a curb. If it's behind a curb is providing pedestrian protection. So when you talk about walking on a roadway, that's pretty obvious. You're on the roadway walking with vehicles. So when there's no off-path roadway, walk path for pedestrians to walk on, and that can be a paved, a concrete, it can be a gravel, it can be a asphalt, like a park district, like what you would see through Frontier Park. All those count as walkways. So when you're talking about walking on a roadway, none of those exist. So the student must walk where traffic is traveling. So the first one is no walkway exists. Now there's a sub piece of this that states that if there is a sidewalk, but it's so close to the roadway that it really provides no protection from vehicles, then it would be less than 2 feet. It would classify as walking on a roadway. So you look at those and you take the measurements and look them up in the tables and get the points. The next one is crossing a roadway, so crossing the street. You're looking for some various factors in this, but the main one is crossing at an intersection. We don't want students running across parkways to cross a street. There should be a key walk through a crosswalk onto another intersection, and that's what we're looking at. So the left side shows intersections and key walks where pedestrians can access the crosswalk, and on the right side, even though there's a street across, if a pedestrian was traveling where the arrows are pointing, there's nothing that gives them access to cross that road besides that parkway. So here's some other serious hazards that we talk about. Crossing railroad tracks, we don't have any in 204 that are documented, mainly because of our boundaries. We don't have students crossing railroad tracks, and if we do, they're more than 1.5 miles away from the school, so there's no need to have a serious safety hazard. They qualify underneath the 1.5 mile eligibility. Or as I discussed earlier, the combination of 1 or more hazards, so 2 or more hazards. And you would take, if there's 6 different hazards, you would take the 2 hazards with the highest score, combine them, and if you have more than 20 points, you would say there's a hazard. Another one, which is what we saw over the past 15, 20 years on the south end of our district, south of 75th Street, the big boom in development and housing development. You can do a temporary construction hazard, meaning there's going to be a long-term construction project, longer than 1 year. This isn't your neighbors putting a new roof on their house, so now I should have transportation. That's not long-term. That's going to be a short-term. This is more for what we see when Stillwater is being built out, Ashwood Park, Ashwood Point, Wagner Farms, those types of developments where there's construction happening over multiple periods, multiple years. So when we're looking at what data do we use, what do we gather, and then what is the tables with the point values show? So as I described, there's the 2 categories for age of the student. We're looking at when a student has to cross a roadway, what controls are providing pedestrian protection. And what that means is what's stopping vehicles from moving. So there's an always stop, 4-way stop sign would be, are we having adult crossing guards help students cross the street, stopping vehicles from moving through the intersection? Are there traffic signals? 2-way stop control, so there's a 4-way stop and only two of the roads have a stop sign. If you're looking at railroads, the crossing protection are crossbucks only, so you don't have the lights and the arms dropping down, or do you have active protection? And then there's nothing. Students are looking both ways before they cross the street and making sure they find that gap in traffic. You're looking at the curb and the curb height. Is it just a slope for drainage for water and rain? Or is there a 6-inch curb that is providing some level of pedestrian protection from vehicles if they ever do leave the road and go off into the shoulder? Length of hazardous section, how long is it? The roadway, the type of roadway, we're looking at the shoulders and the type of shoulder. Speed of traffic, which I'll touch base a little bit more on speed of traffic here in a second. Volume of vehicles, the walkway, and as I stated, it doesn't have to be a concrete sidewalk. It can be a gravel or a asphalt prairie path type of situation. And the width of the roadway. How long will the student be in the roadway as they're crossing the street? Going back to speed of traffic, we have tools that we can actually do very comprehensive traffic studies with, and we can put those out for weeks at a time, where we can get a lot of data, gap time, actual speed. So when you're doing the study, you have to take the posted speed limit and look that up into the point tables and apply those points. But what we have the ability to do is look at what the actual speed is during the study and during the times that students are crossing or going to and from school. If we find that there's a speeding problem, we get to share that information with the police departments and sheriff's office so that they can do high visibility traffic campaigns to try to slow and calm that traffic a little bit before we would expose students to it in a walking situation. And we've done that, and the police are very responsive because it's real data, real reporting, and they get to see exactly what we're looking at and taking all factors into consideration instead of just taking the speed limit sign during the evaluation. Judgment points. So this is kind of where we get a little bit judgment into it, but we don't get to just do what we want, right? This is not a hey, let's just add a point or two to create a hazard and provide transportation. We have to, after all that base criteria is studied and evaluated, looked up, and point values are assigned, if there's something else that's directly related to vehicular traffic, we can look at it and add judgment if it's necessary. We can add up to 2 judgment points for each type of hazard. So let's just say in a combination hazard, you potentially can add up to 4 judgment points. But that doesn't mean if crossing one roadway, you add a point or 2, you add the same criteria in another roadway. If the conditions don't exist, you don't just blanketly add these judgment points. The students have to be exposed to this additional piece of information or factor during the times they're walking to and from school. So if something is happening at 11 p.m. every day, it's irrelevant. We don't get to just add judgment points because something is happening at 11 p.m. or 7 p.m. It's got to happen during the times that the students are walking to and from school to say that there is a consistent factor that is exposing students to a hazard on a daily basis that needs to be warranted for additional judgment points. Some of those are unusual accident experience on a roadway that a student is crossing. We see, let's just say we see vehicles leaving the roadway, going into the walk, like the sidewalk, on a daily basis or a weekly basis. At the time students are exposed to that, we can add judgment points for that. A high volume of vehicles crossing roadway during times pupils are traveling. So if a student is walking, for example, down 95th Street and they're walking past a gas station, that's uncontrolled traffic coming in and out. We can add judgment points for that if we would like. And like I said, if the situation or factor occurs outside the times, it's not even considered. It can't even be considered. So 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, when we started looking at all these, we had 68 hazard boundaries across our district, across every school. I've been able to verify 30 of those hazards that we have a IDOT approval document from and say that these conditions continue to exist. There's 3 that we have an IDOT approval that I still have to get to. There's 28 that we need a full evaluation. That's what we're going to talk about here on a timeline in a few slides. And then there's 7 that I've had to do full evaluations on. And why those 2 pieces of information are important is we've been providing transportation without me being able to locate the documents on the reason why. So we're doing a full evaluation. So what that means is if there's 500 students that are affected in an area, I have to evaluate 500 walk paths to school. It takes time. It could take anywhere from 30 days to 90 to 120 days. So it takes time. When I talked to the auditor from ISB about this, he agreed with our strategy to not pull transportation because we don't have the document. At some point, somebody made a determination, do the evaluation, evaluating current criteria, current conditions, make a new determination, and move forward. We have a process where we notify if there's going to be a change in eligibility. We notify them well in advance, typically in March, prior to the first day of the next school year, to give some level of advance notice so that families can pre-plan. We also had 15 areas that we didn't have serious safety hazard evaluations on or an approval that a family or a community member petitioned us to evaluate. Mainly the ones in 2022 are directly tied to when we were studying the re-boundaries and drawing those in. Me and my team member figured, hey, we come across a roadway, we think it could be a hazard, let's go do the evaluation. So 12 of those are directly tied to the re-boundary, but the other ones are tied to petitions from community members. And those are who were not receiving transportation, but now are because it justified and met the criteria. Over the past 7 years, we've evaluated these areas that were receiving transportation on a serious safety hazard and no longer are. Like I said, we gave the ample notice to remove transportation from these areas so that families can plan. But these now we have full documentation on why the hazard doesn't exist and why we made the determination. As I said, during the reboundary assessment, we had to spend not only that second semester drawing the new boundaries, we were also asked to do the grandfathering evaluation. Can we allow grandfathering and provide transportation? So second semester of the 21-22 school year was pretty interesting, to say the least, in my world. It was pretty busy, but all in all, we had to assess 16 areas. 12 are the ones that I showed you on a previous slide, and then there were 4 that did not result, that we thought it would be close. We evaluated it in the determination that it didn't meet the criteria for IDOT serious safety hazard. So out of those 28 boundaries that I still have to assess, like I said, it takes anywhere from 30 to 90 days. I'm starting with some of the bigger boundaries, high school, middle school boundaries, in hopes that when I get to one of the smaller boundaries, I would already at least collected some of that data with the roadways type of traffic control, and it's more just verification than actually spending time in the field. That's another thing to note is none of this is done from a desk. Like, I'm not sitting in an office. Dr. Talley jokes around with me, I came looking for you in my office and never can find you. And that's a good thing. It means I'm working, right? But these are done in the field, taking measurements, looking at the conditions, walking the walk paths as a student would walk, which is what takes the most amount of time. I oversee 2 of the largest operations in the state. We're one of the bigger school districts, food service and transportation. So my day typically starts anywhere from 5:30 in the morning. I mean, it's going strong still right now, right? And when routes are over, I'm in the schools for food service. So dedicating this time, this is a very tentative timeline. We have a lot of situations that come up during the day that pull me off. And so this is very tentative. This can be accelerated or it may take longer. It really depends on the amount of time I'm able to commit to it on an annual basis. We do partner with local DOTs, and typically if I see that, hey, we can improve a roadway, even though it may not meet, let's just say there's no traffic signal, we can partner with whether it's the DuPage Department of Transportation or Naperville or City of Aurora's traffic and engineering teams. Hey, if we put a 4-way stop here, if we put marked crosswalks, try to make the pedestrian path safer as they're going to and from school. They're very receptive to it. They understand that I get when I'm looking at, and I can speak things to them. Whether we're talking, pedestrian crossing systems, increasing timings, marking crosswalks, preferred crosswalk paths. They're very receptive to that. And they listen. And if I ask them to meet me out somewhere, we're able to coordinate with them and partner with them. Where the police and the law enforcement agencies come into play is when we are looking at speeding. If we determine that there's a speeding issue or traffic accidents, I'll reach out to them and ask them, hey, do you classify this as a high accident exposure area? So that if we did add judgment points, we have real data to support that when I submit that to the Department of Transportation. Because you got to have the backup for it. You can't just say there's a lot of accidents, because they're going to go look. And if they say there's none, they're going to deny the evaluation. Are there any questions on serious safety hazards before I go on to some of these other things? Or we can just wait to the end. Sounds good.
Wait till then.
Yep. So some of the initiatives that we've been working on over several years are school-based transportation resources and tools. This provides resources for live GPS and live information at the building level. So if a parent calls the school office and says, hey, bus is late, do you know where it's at? The school can look up the same GPS that I'm looking up. So they don't need to call me, they don't need to call First Student, they can look it up in the moment and provide information right away. If they're sitting in the afternoon waiting for a bus to arrive, again, they don't need to call First Student. This is allowing us to put dispatchers behind the wheel to cover driver shortages and only have 1 or 2 people staffing our dispatches. They also don't need to pick up the phone. They can just log into the system and look to see where that bus is at. They don't need to call me or my transportation router to ask for, can I get a bus route or a bus stop list? They can look up that information themselves. We're obviously always available if they need assistance and training, and we've been doing that. But for the most part, a lot of this information is now available at their fingertips. We are still very interested in electrification, whether it's a school bus. We're also looking at the EV vans for some of our special ed population, see if we can put some of those into our fleet to evaluate, charging and implementation. Whenever I have these conversations with other school districts or even legislators, it's, do you have any reluctancy? And I say, I don't care what powers the bus as long as it's safe and reliable. If I can keep the vehicle on the road and it's safe for children, whether it's an electric motor or a diesel or gas-powered engine, makes no difference to me. But we got to make sure we are cautious moving forward so that we don't have dual assets. We don't have students sitting on the side of the road on the bus because it wasn't fully charged or whatnot. So we're very cautious on how, I'd like to move forward with piloting and before implementing. Like, let's test it just like we did with MyStop. We didn't just flip the switch and turn on MyStop, right? It took us 3 years. And that was because we wanted to make sure the data was reliable, and when we turned it on for parents, we didn't have to turn it off. Buying an electric vehicle is very expensive. It's about 3 to 4 times the cost of a diesel or a gasoline engine bus. So investing that amount of money, we want to make sure that we can keep it on the road. Middle school multifunctional activity buses, so I know that's a big word for those little white activity buses that you see at our schools. We put those for our middle schools because as the driver shortage situation was getting worse, we couldn't cover charters at a time earlier than 3:30. Well, they want to leave at 3:30 to go to competitions and activities. So we gave each middle school a little white activity bus so that they can leave on their own terms. One thing to note, we're not just tossing keys to drivers. They have to go be a district-approved driver. And even when we meet with our insurance company in our annual renewal, they say that we're one of the top tier on how we have this driver training program and driver approval program. They take our documents and share them with other school districts. So we're not just tossing the keys to any driver. They have to go through not only a driving record check, they got to go through behind-the-wheel training, and then annual refreshers we require them to do. So we're putting a safe, reliable driver behind the wheel. First steps, especially now that they're at that new facility over on Schumann Boulevard, we purchased 2 wheelchair accessible minivans. We reviewed that last year, I believe. But one thing we did add was we added a multifunctional school bus that has the wheelchair lift. This is allowing, especially with STEPS being a community integrated program, teaching kids how to work, how to have life skills as they transition out of school. This is helping our STEP staff provide timely, on-demand transportation, not only for the ambulatory students, but for the non-ambulatory that are in a wheelchair. They can get in a vehicle and go. So it's really helped them with their programming, especially now that they're out of district boundaries. The MyStop update, we're fully implemented as of last school year. Last school year, we were averaging anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 users daily. This year, we're a little over 5,000 average users daily. Good Good thing to note is we're getting about 95% visibility. That 5% visibility is just either a bad GPS signal or because we're combining routes and collapsing routes to cover driver shortages. It's just a limitation within the system. So for about 95% of our families that are using MyStop, you're going to be able to see an ETA of where the bus is at. I don't see this as a daily tool. I've always said that I see this if it's raining or if there's snow out, you're looking to make sure the bus is running on time so you're not standing in that weather. So I won't go through this full bullet point, but this is more for the community to understand. Calling me in my office directly is going to have a delayed response. You're always best, and it's kind of our protocol to call your school office. They're either going to have the information already and be able to provide it more timely. And if you have an issue or concern you want to report, our school administration, I work with them very closely. They should know that you have a concern or that there's a problem, and I'm working with them on resolving it. So we always say who to contact. I always like to put this in my transportation presentations because a lot of people just want to call my office, and as I stated, I'm very seldomly in it, so they get a delayed response, and that just sometimes amplifies the situation because I know I'm a parent. When I call the school, I kind of want a quick response, and if I got to wait a day, I'm not a very patient person. So open it up for questions.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
How about Miss Jane?
Thank you, Ron.
You're welcome.
I've got my notes in front of me here. So I really appreciate the history lesson you kind of gave us in the sense that we haven't done this for a long time. Looking at your timeline, it almost seems like it takes a good 7 years or so for one person to go through this, and then we're audited every 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, some of that is because they haven't been done. We're doing a full walk path evaluation. If you were just verifying the conditions and we knew what caused the boundary to be established, a lot faster. So once we get these caught up, it's not going to take 7 years to continue. We'll be able to do all of them in the same year. And that's what we really want to get to, is knowing why we have them in place in that documentation.
Yeah, so that was my question is, once we get through this first round or this round of fully evaluating the areas, what do you see as the best practices of the cycle of, reviewing this content?
I'm constantly in the field, so that's what that comes into play. So if I have to, just verify that a traffic signal didn't get added on 95th Street, for example, and kids are crossing 95th Street, I'm just verifying that those conditions have not changed. There's a lot of construction projects that our cities do, and sometimes they're removing things and sometimes they're adding things. So you're just verifying that that hazard is as it was when you evaluated it prior. And then if it's not, then you got to do another evaluation.
Yeah. During one of the slides, you were discussing your assessment of speed.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned, I just wanted you to reiterate, when do you conduct your studies generally of those areas with regard to speed?
I wait, we get through startup, so I'll take a lot of measurement data with the roadway and all of that, usually in the fall, sometimes early after the weather breaks in January, February. Measurements they're going to be what they are, right? So traffic data, I want to do it on a kind of consistent basis. So people like to say, well, what about the rain, ice, and snow? And I've always say those are temporary conditions. They go away, right? So sometimes that leads to more traffic or less traffic. So I do it more in the fall or spring, and I like to do it before we make the final determination because that's going to be the most current traffic pattern and traffic data that we're going to be able to gather. So if we're making a determination in February, early March of a hazard exists or no longer exists, I'll typically do it as close as I can with that, and I'll do a week's study. I'll put a device out there. It's a radar device, counts cars, looks at speed, looks at the length of the vehicle to see if there's more semis versus passenger vehicles, speed, gap times when there's no vehicles traveling, and you can break that out by the minute, 15-minute, half-hour, hour.
Okay. And so it covers the time when the students would be crossing.
Yes.
And the last question I had was with regard to the the electronic buses. I know at our state conferences, we hear a lot of, there's always a session on like electronic busing, and all of us get really, there's a lot of excitement with the possibility of providing a more sustainable means of transporting our students. And I know you mentioned something about piloting it. Where exactly are we in that piloting process?
So because we don't own our buses, we don't own the fleet, they're owned by First Student, we contract with First Student, we really have to work with them, and it has to fit into their capital expenditure model. With VW coming out with grants and EPA coming out with grants, they've applied for them on our behalf. So we're in, I believe they call it Tier 2, Tier 3, based on what we qualify for. We're trying to get 4 of them over the next couple years. We're on the list. It's just they're taking forever to produce and deliver. Yeah.
Okay, great. And Matt.
Yeah, I'll just add really quickly, because I think this ties a little bit to some of the budget discussions earlier. So we're kind of stuck in the middle with these electric buses, I think, and this is similar to some other things challenges we have. So as Ron mentioned, the EPA has been really forward over the past 12 to 18 months with various grant programs. Most of them are tied to poverty counts and economic justice zones. So we generally do not qualify for the grants that are out there right now. We're sort of waiting for that grant program to continue to develop and hopefully expand for us to kind of start to qualify. On the other hand, there are districts with more resources than us that are able to go and buy an electric bus without a grant. And we do have a neighborhood district that has done that, a neighboring district that's done that. So we're kind of stuck in the middle where, as Ron mentioned, between not owning our own buses and having some of the financial challenges we're not able to buy it independent of the grant. Again, these are buses that cost 3 to 4 times a traditional diesel-powered bus. But again, we're not quite qualifying for some of the grants that are out there yet either.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'll just end with a comment in that I've talked to Ron many times over the years to try to understand this process, and I learn something new every time you go over it. So I just want the community who's tuning in to understand how nuanced this process is, and how much we appreciate the method with which you approach all of these projects, and also are detail-oriented in sharing that with us. And I know you're filtering also because it's so in-depth, but I do respect that, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Ms. Gentz.
I would like to just say exactly what Ms. Jane did. No, thank you so much. Honestly, this is such a huge undertaking. And the fact that it is just you, is absolutely amazing. So just thank you. I want to start with that. And I just had a couple questions. Mm-hmm. As far as grandfathering transportation goes, are we still transporting grandfathered students this year?
Yeah, so the grandfathering plan that we put into place last year was so students can finish at the school that they were currently in as the new boundaries were implemented. So last year it was rising 4th graders, so 5th graders, which this year they're done. Mm-hmm. This year we have 7th and 8th graders still or now it's 8th graders. And then we have juniors and seniors at the high school level. So at the end of next year, mm-hmm. we'll pretty much be all done with the grandfathering.
Okay, and then when you are all done, does that just mean maybe we have not as much of a driver shortage then for?
Yeah, I mean, we're putting about 6 extra drivers on the road right now.
Okay.
Tied to solely grandfathering.
Okay.
If you look at the area, one of the biggest areas is this Meadow Lakes area around here that the new boundaries were Waubonsie, but they decided to go to Mattia. And if you recall, when I did the presentation last April, that was the hitch in the get along to see if we can even do it, and we were able to make it work. Yeah. So once that kind of phases out, we're putting a lot of buses in this area going a far distance so that the students can stay at Mattia and finish that at the school that they started at.
Okay. That's great. No, honestly, thank you.
No problem.
I did wonder, as far as if we're not talking about busing, we're talking about maybe crossing guards. Mm-hmm. Is it the same process with hazard points, mm-hmm. or is it?
So crossing guards is a little bit more flexible.
Okay.
for the district to decide whether they're going to provide that staffing or not. When it comes to a hazard study, there is criteria. It's if you have a crossing guard, it's the same as an always stop, which is the safest for a pedestrian to cross. It means no vehicles are moving through the intersection. If we feel that adding a crossing guard would make the pedestrians safer as they're crossing the road, then we work with the schools on saying, hey, if we added a crossing guard, it makes that crossing that roadway safer. Let's go ahead and do that. And then we do a follow-up evaluation, and it's looking at various things like lighting and time of day, age of the pupil, distance, number of lanes, and then we have a formal. I did create a formal document that does a point-based system, but it's not set in statute like Illinois
Okay.
Department of Serious Safety Hazards are.
You just did that in your free time. You
Oh,
figured,
of course,
why not?
yeah. I know, Saturdays and Sundays are fun.
Exactly. And just one last thing, when there are route changes, as there's going to continue to be obviously over the next few years, are the school administrators contacted first, or are they kind of the first ones to hear about it?
Yes, it's
Okay.
a lot easier and faster if we contact the building for individual route changes. So on items that it's mass, it'll come from the district. So if
Okay.
it's gonna affect more than one route, a whole school, a whole area, that'll come from the district, whether it be Dr. Talley, myself, or Miss Lisa Berry. Now, if it's like an individual route that stop times are changing, we'll provide that information to the school, and they'll send that information out to parents that, check Parent View on Friday after 7 p.m. Bus routes are changing.
Okay. No, thank you, honestly. And I just have to say, God, this is so involved, and
Yeah.
it is a huge process. And obviously, we all in the district take the children's safety very seriously. So I can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Mr. Karubas?
Yeah, thank you. Slide 3 deals with the funding for the state property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
I think this works in conjunction with our budget presentation, but when often our district is compared to other school districts that might have 20 to 30% more revenue per pupil, we have the funding split is much more important for us to have a balanced budget. So it's very important for us to qualify for a lot of these rules that are required for state funding. State exams and design on state funding can have different rules where they don't have to follow the 4.5 mile, or they could have open boundaries, or people can elect to up the different school districts, school buildings. So a lot of our choices are dictated by our budget constraints. I think that's important to point out. Then I would like to move to slide 19. I think the important takeaway for me on this slide is to show that this review is systemic across the whole district. There's been some consternation that we are just focusing on certain schools. But the reason for doing so is because our budget can only allow for one person to do this job, and that's going to require that we do it slowly, methodically over years. And that is the way we can do it within our budget. But the important part is to say, look, we're doing it systemically. We're not just doing, Aurora. We're not just doing the north side. We're doing the whole district. But it's just going to take some time.
Yep.
Nothing further.
All right, Ms. Deming?
Ron, thank you. This is, I think we've all learned quite a bit over the last few months, especially since we went through redistricting and some of the decisions that we've gone through over the last few months. So thank you very much, because certainly my appreciation for what you do has increased immensely. Staying on slide 19, I had a quick question as we kind of look through the breakouts and various, the annual reviews. Does this indicate sort of that we'll go in order here, or you're looking, so for instance,
Yeah, it's not etched in stone. So as I
Okay.
go through some of the bigger areas and I get measurement data, if I come across where it's easier to do, let's just say Graham Elementary, because I have that whole NEQA boundary and I have most of the measurements and all it takes is counting cars and putting a device up, yeah, I'll move that forward. That's why it can be accelerated or it can take longer depending on. But like look at next school year, I'm doing Clow and Gregory because they're virtually the same area, right? So it's just looking at it. It's very fluid and adaptive. And if, like I said, if I come across that I have more data for an area that I wasn't planning on for 27, 28, and I can accelerate that, then absolutely I'll get that done. Yeah.
and just from a notification standpoint, as you conclude each area, will the notification happen then, or will we kind of wait until
So if
the end?
eligibility is not going to change, nothing will change for the family. They're just going to
Okay.
keep transportation, but now we actually have the documentation and the determination made. If it does change, then yes, we want to give them notification near spring break-ish timeframe, get them through the current school year, still providing transportation. But the removal of it would be starting with the upcoming school year.
Okay. Thank you.
And that also gives time for feedback so that parents can ask questions, learn the process, get some of that out of the way before they move on to making, arrangements for the upcoming school year.
Slide 6, so critical as you went through this, and either the prior slide or next slide, just looking at that breakout of how much we receive from the state. Can you just, I just wanted you to ask if you could just talk again, that reimbursement, that audit cycle, the last audit, so that the state actually comes in and they review what you've provided. Can you?
So they're looking at everything that we submit. They're looking at our ledgers, the IDOT. They're looking at what we collected in revenues. They're looking at, there's a lot of data that goes into the annual claim. They're making sure that we've accurately allocated that. When Matt was in the comptroller position, he probably remembers that I was cleaning up the ledger to make sure that we were only putting eligible expenses on the transportation fund, and anything that wasn't eligible, let's get that down to a building level or an activity account. What that does is it increases the amount that we're able to claim because there's more eligible expenses within the ledger. So when they come in, they're looking at everything that you've submitted and all the data, the number of students. They look at the special ed students that we're transporting, and if we're paying for aides and monitors on the bus, they'll pull IEPs. I mean, it's a pretty in-depth audit that they're looking at to make sure that we're compliant with the claim and instruction procedures.
And that's just kind of what I wanted to make, wanted you to share again, is just the fact that this is not the decisions that are made and what's submitted, it's not arbitrary.
Yep.
And it is actually reviewed again.
And it's about compliance, right? We want to make sure that we're in compliance with all the rules, all the laws, all the board policies. We're setting policies that align to best practices and procedures, and those are the items that we're audited on, right? They're not looking at, oh, did you set a local rule or procedure? If it's eligible or not eligible, well, then the district, or if it's not eligible, the district has to pay for that. They're not even going to look at the reimbursement. But when you do that, the more non-eligible expenses you add to the claim, it drags the entire formula down. So we actually would get less.
And that's why it's just so important for us to make sure that our expenditures are correctly allocated the way they should be, because we want to provide that transportation in those areas where we're meeting, where we are complying. But we want to make sure that that budget which is so critical for us. We don't have the, you know, the over expenditures that we can do, that we can put them, for instance, in the academic setting or, you know, facilities. But so that's why it's just so critical to make sure that that we have that transportation compliance the way it should be, because we just can't provide our own buses. That's just, you know, so we have to make sure that we're in compliance.
Maximize the revenues, minimize the expenses, right?
And then I just wondered, and I did not ask you this before, so if you don't have the answer, then you can just let me know. Do we have an idea of what the average time, and I know this is gonna sort of broad, but the average time that our students spend on a bus that receive transportation versus?
About 22 minutes is the average.
About 22 minutes.
Elementary is actually faster. It's closer to that 16 minutes. Again, based on the boundary location, they're smaller boundaries. As you have bigger boundaries, some of our longer routes are the Hill-Matia area, Granger. Those are a little bit longer because of those boundaries are just a little bit bigger, and where the you know, we were able to eliminate some of the islands and isolations within the boundary, which sped it up. You know, some of those routes were running closer to that half hour, but now they're lower 20s. But yeah.
And some of our former elementary school boundaries were extended.
Yeah, I mean, we had a boundary in Kendall that was pretty much, you know, almost a 40-minute ride for a student, and now they're under 20 minutes.
Thank you, because that's, I think parents are very, you know, want to make sure that if their student has to be bused, often you don't want them on a bus for 25, 30, 40 minutes.
And there's a lot of contributing factors that's helping us stay ahead of the driver shortage. One of them is now we can have, instead of single and two-tier routes, because we're able to add another one on because the routes are running faster, we can get another route on them. My first year here, we were putting 315 drivers on the road, first student drivers. Now we're putting 231. So not only through the work of the reassessment of the areas, just operational efficiencies, rebounding, tiering up these drivers, adding supplemental transportation for charter and activities after school, we're down to that 231. And I think at the end of this, we'll probably find, at the end of the evaluations, we'll probably find another 15, 20 drivers that are a little bit more heavy. And then we can get back to having standby drivers and sub-drivers and those types of situations that, you know, were here before the driver shortage was in place.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Rising.
Couple comments first. If you go slide 3, reiterating a couple things, but I just wanted to make some different points. First of all, Mr. Shibley, thank you for bringing up the boundary and the secondary guiding principles that not only the board administration looked at, but 200 community members that were part of the boundary committee that in essence said that students should be going to their neighborhood community schools, and that's where they live in proximity to their schools. That was one of the things. And the last boundary change we had was back in 2008. That took 3 years to complete. In that time before we did the last one, we created a huge amount of pockets where people in the northern and middle part of the district were going to Kendall Elementary south of 103rd, we're going out to Owen Elementary east of Naperville Plainfield Road. It was a nightmare. We have a big district, 26 square miles. As Mr. Karubis mentioned and some other board members, how we get financed on this, and we're already spending $26 million, and we, out of our budget I just mentioned, we have a $500,000 excess. We only get 55% from the state. So if the state were to come in, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, but if the state were to come in and look and say, hey, when's the last time you did this, and you haven't been truthful on this, we essentially are responsible for that 55%, correct?
So they can adjust and have findings that adjust future claims, but they can also put you on a financial watch list. So that means you're audited every year.
Yeah.
Which is a dangerous situation to be in.
Okay, so slide 14. Thank you for bringing up the third point on judgment points. Judgment points are not to be used to generate or manufacture a serious safety hazard. That has come up frequently, judgment points. I believe it is the belief of the administration and the belief of the board that we should be following the guidelines that are outlined to a T. And in fact, if we did give judgment points on a manufactured safety hazard, we would be out of compliance and also be responsible for that route or the financial difference, correct?
Yes, small exceptions lead to big exceptions. You mean.
Slide 15, I just want to make sure I understand this really quick. So far, we've identified as hazards or ones that can be completed 37 routes, is that correct? So it would be the first one and the last one, we've done 37 or have identified?
Those are the ones that I've verified.
Right.
And they've either continued as hazards or have been removed as hazards.
Okay.
So the 7 have been removed as hazards.
And then 3 are current, and then 28
That was the schedule.
is the schedule, that was the timeline for the future that you have outlined?
Yep.
Okay. Is there any rhyme or reason to the way you determine the timeline? Because I know we talked about the timeline.
Yeah, it's, the larger areas can take up to 90 days. Smaller ones can take up to 30. So it's the amount of time that I can commit after startup. Smaller measurements, you know, whether it's on a weekend, a Saturday, Sunday after taking sons and daughters to soccer, taking a few measurements. Sometimes it's piecemeal that way, but making sure it's all consistent. Then waiting until kind of the inclement weather, and then just the day-to-day job responsibilities for food service and transportation. There are just days that there's zero chance I can get out in the field to take those measurements. So taking all of that into consideration, this is what I feel is a doable timeline, a good timeline that I'd be able to complete them all. So, and some of the reasons was, you know, if I did individuals hazard boundaries, not looking at the larger ones first, I would probably be doubling up on taking measurements, which would take longer. So I'm trying to, you know, methodically look at the larger ones, taking measurements that I can use for other areas is kind of like my thought process with it.
Okay, yeah, I can now understand that
Yep.
based on the correlations of when you put them on the timeline. Okay, all right.
Also means we're potentially adjusting hazard studies for our high school students, our older students first before we work down to the middle and elementary levels. So that's also built into the schedule. And again, just to clarify, we have 28 to review. That doesn't mean all 28 will have transportation removed. It's likely that a good, you know, a good percentage will stay as hazards. We just need to go through and redo that work.
And then just one final comment. You know, individual board members that I've talked to, and I've talked to both of you, and I've talked to Dr. Talley, we would love to offer bus transportation to everybody, but at the same time, we need to stay in compliance for legality reasons, for financial reasons, and because if we don't, that money would have to come from somewhere. And again, that goes back to the budget, and that's why we want to make sure that we're being compliant.
Yeah, I think, you know, overriding or overarching all of this discussion is really that that difficult decision that I think we've made, that for better or worse, we're providing transportation where it's eligible for state reimbursement, so that we can, and we're providing it as efficiently as possible. So that involves double tiering or triple tiering our routes, because we want to make as much money available to support our classrooms and to support the learning that's going on inside our building. So it's a difficult decision, but it's a decision to again support the school day, as opposed to potentially providing additional support getting to school or getting home from school. And you know, we did a lot of work over the last year or two with our strategic plan, and I think have identified a lot of priorities as part of that we want to get working on, and ultimately that's where the additional funds are going.
Thanks.
So thank you. I know, Ron, you talked about starting your job at 5 or 5:30, but I know often you're even earlier than that if there's bad weather or a bus driver missing, you know, their route or whatever. So really tremendous thanks for you for that, and all of the food service work too is not an easy task. So it's very clear that this is a very complicated assessment when you do the transportation analysis, and this board over the last year has probably learned way more about that than we ever expected or maybe even wanted to, about all the different questions that were asked, because it is a really tough thing to remove transportation from an area. But we are going to go through and we're going to catch up and assess all of the different areas. We, as a board, went through the painful process of changing our boundaries, which also helped address financially some of the costs we were seeing and bus driver shortage, but also efficiency. Like, people want to be close to their school. So it's like that whole process was difficult, but it does lead to some benefits for us. And all of this was taken into account considering safety too. So we've never put that aside for any of our students or any of our analysis. But thank you for being an expert. I know every time a parent writes in with a question about transportation, they're going to get like a dictionary explanation of everything that you could ever think of with respect to this. So I thank you for that and for educating us and all of that. And I know this will continue to be a very tough and challenging area. So thank you for your dedication to helping our students and families. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next presentation is from Mr. Matt Shipley again and Mr. John Robinson on building operations.
John's still moving a little slower, so we'll give him a
You got rid of your cart, though.
All right. Yeah. Good evening once again. We're excited tonight to present our building operations update. Again, this is consistent with all 4 of our strategic plan priorities, as well as board policy 4-150 on facility management and building programs. John and myself were last in front of the board in October of 2022 to present our annual update. Although since then we've talked a lot about facilities as part of our budget presentations. We've talked a lot about our ongoing work with our master facility plan. I think that's come up probably at almost every board meeting over the last year. And then we've had a lot of work that's been part of our consent agenda for various approvals for our summer projects that are just completed. So we're excited to provide a comprehensive overview, although we've definitely had a lot of related discussions over the past year. Tonight, I'm going to start just giving a quick building operations overview and a little discussion on building rentals. Again, it's been a while since we've updated the board on our building rental program. And then JR is going to overview our summer projects that were just completed, as well as provide an overview of what construction work we are proposing for the summer of 2024. Just to kind of provide a little bit of perspective as we start talking about our facilities and the amount of work that we were able to do this past year and hopefully can get done in summer of 2024. We do have 36 facilities within the district, representing just over 4 million square feet of buildings. That's over 1.4 times the size of the John Hancock building downtown. Our buildings encompass over 655 acres of square footage. As you know, a lot of our campuses, in addition to the building and parking and infrastructure, have some significant field and outdoor space that's included in our property lines as well. Daily, we have just short of 26,000 students in our building and nearly 3,000 staff. When you incorporate volunteers and guest educators, I think we can round up to over 30,000 people in our facilities each day during the school day. To support, again, all that square footage and those people, we have just over 200 employees supporting our building operations program. That includes 4 Indian Prairie employees that are our project managers, our director of building operations, and some of our management team. And then again, over 200 workers through Airmark, and that includes our custodian $1.8 million. And then we just approved this evening an $18 million capital budget for fiscal '24. Again, JR will go into our anticipated plans for that $18 million of capital. Again, one of the aspects of building operations, again, a significant aspect that we probably haven't talked about in a few years with the board, but is our building rental program. So we covered the facts behind our school day and having over 30,000 people in our buildings each day during our school hours. But our facilities are also made available to our community during non-school hours. We really have a diverse set of uses when we talk about our building rental program. Our sort of specialized spaces in our high schools are particularly popular. That's our pools, our auditoriums, and other theater equipment. Our gyms are used very frequently by athletic programs and by our park districts. But we see it down to the individual classroom for Cub Scout meetings or community education events. This boardroom on nights we're not here talking to the board is often used for continuing education programs through our Regional Office of Education, for example. So there's a lot of rooms, a lot of parts of our buildings that are being used, again, after school hours almost every day of the year. It's brought in over $800,000 in revenue, but I'll say our revenue number doesn't include rentals from our PTAs. It doesn't include the support of Indian Prairie activities that are occurring in our facilities. It doesn't include rentals from Naperville Park District. That's covered by a separate intergovernmental agreement. And so really, the real numbers that I think show the scope of this operation is that we had just short of 13,000 individual bookings last year, and we estimate we had over 1 million individuals attend building rental programs in our facilities last year. This does have an impact on our facilities and on district operations. There is a personnel cost associated with the building rentals, whether that is our administrative overhead or administrative review of the program, whether that's our custodial needs to maintain the facilities or clean the facilities, again, as well as just specialists to support some of those rentals. So again, that additional cost it puts on a pool or on a theater or an auditorium, needing to have a specialist there that can support those building rentals and those times. Again, utilities and supplies, and then additional wear and tear on our facilities. Again, talking about our master facility plan and looking at the age of our buildings, that wear and tear, as our buildings get older, continue to be a bigger piece of this puzzle, trying to balance the educational needs of our students, our community use, as well as making sure that we're maintaining our facilities and keeping up with those capital needs. So with that, again, just wanted to update the board on what we have planned to review this program and hopefully bring some solutions that are going to be a win-win for both the district and our renters over the next year. So first, we did have to increase our fees this spring, so we increased our fees about 10 to 20%, and that was our first fee increase in 2011. So that was a recognition that some of the costs were getting a little bit out of balance with the revenues we were charging these groups. So we hope to do a more comprehensive review of the program this year. Cost will definitely be a part of that, and what we're charging. So we may see some additional adjustments to our fee schedule, but we're really looking to how we can make this facility rental process even better for our community members, as well as making sure it supports or at least doesn't impact our student environment. And so that's looking at our approval process and our application requirements, potentially looking at new reservation software. Our current program's a little cumbersome. It's not web-based. It doesn't allow the renter to potentially see availability on the front end, so they're requesting availability without maybe knowing what facilities we have available or what types of facilities we have. We're also, as part of that, would be looking at really kind of globalizing across the district the support we provide. So a lot of the approval process and making facilities available is still school-based. So if a renter, for example, wants to utilize a specific elementary school, we're kind of putting the onus on the elementary school to provide the custodial support or provide the building supervisor that may need to stay as part of that. Again, for a time, that was kind of, that wasn't as much of an issue. We had individuals who were excited about working the overtime or supporting the rental, but as we've continued to see the labor market tighten up, we've continued to put a lot of stress on our building folks just during the school day. Some of those resources have started to become a little bit more challenging. So looking at how we can support those at a district level and maybe make this more of a district-wide determination, whether that's having a district-wide pool of custodians who are interested in district administrators or district personnel who are willing to serve as site supervisors, for example. And again, the final piece of that is really to benchmark with other districts, with other area rentals, to make sure that, again, we're providing a product to our renters, to our community, that supports the community need, that's competitive with what we see in the market, and is a good complement to, again, other facilities that are available throughout the area. So again, we hope to be in front of the board probably this spring with sort of an updated fee schedule and just kind of a report of how we're going to put some changes in place for the 24-25 year with our building rental program.
All right, let's change gears and look at some fun things that happened this summer and the fun that JR had. We were fortunate to invest $20 million into the buildings this summer, and we did a significant amount of work on many buildings. You can see the categories. Some of the smaller projects we did that are overshadowed sometimes, but we put new orchestra pit covers at Mattia and Nequa. We upgraded all of our intercom systems so that we can now make all calls and call room to room, so it's a good safety feature. The pool filter at Nequa was replaced, and we did some drainage at some of the ball fields that were causing problems with spring sports, so that was good, and some storage sheds. And as we get into this proposal, I'll show you some pictures. It's pretty cool. All the projects performed on time and on budget. So let's take a look at what we did. The paving projects, we did paving projects at 13 locations, and you can see the schools that were identified. The pictures in particular, just to kind of go from left to right, the first one is Nequa Valley. That's the front circle and all the concrete, and that was 27 years old, so we got 27 years out of it. That was pretty good. Most concrete and asphalt don't last that long. The next picture is the 12 courts we redid at Wabansie Valley, and we heard from the tennis team. They turned out beautiful. The next picture is Crone, and then the next one is Georgetown. As we try every year, we did some roofing projects and some brickwork, but I'm showing you some roofing projects. The first one is not a pretty picture of a beach, but it's Crone, and it's a rubber roof. The next one is Georgetown, and it was a shingled roof, and we replaced it with a steel roof. It should give us 45 or 50 years. The third one on the top right is Owen, and then the bottom one is Burkett. And the interesting thing about Burkett is that building is now completely done with a brand new roof. One of my favorite projects this summer was flooring. We completed flooring projects at 4 schools. We also replaced the gyms at 6 schools. And the reason why we do it this way is that when we replace floors at schools, we have to move all the furniture out. That's a lot of furniture in a school, right? Where do you put it? So we stick it in the gym and the stage, and then the following year we will go back and do those. But in anticipation of the coming years, we're going to go ahead and do the gyms at 6 schools next summer, and we can stay ahead of it. So we're going to catch up and stay ahead, and I'll get into that in the 2024 project. So we replaced the 6 gyms. I think one of the more fun things that we did with the staff we elect is that we had them pack up their classrooms, especially the LMCs, and that was a chore. They dreaded it, but the benefit was they got brand new floors and baseboard. they got to clear out a lot of stuff in their life that they probably didn't need. We all need to do that once in a while. And we promised them we'd paint their classrooms. And the painting went so well, we were actually able to paint almost every LMC, all the offices, some of the hallways. So when the staff got back, the schools look really nice. If you haven't had a chance to go, please go look at them. But I'll just run through real quick. The first one is Gombert. That's looking at the library from upstairs. That's the tan flooring that they chose. The next one is Brookdale, and they chose a gray floor. It's a light gray and a dark gray base. The next two are Steck and Calshaw. And I just wanted to point out, like the Steck one, that's the third one. That is a gym. Used to be carpeted, if you remember. That is actually vinyl tile, just like the tile you see downstairs. Those lines are vinyl tile lines laid into laser cut and laid into that floor, so it looks just like a wood floor. And the air quality is improved. The cleaning area has improved. It's so much easier for our staff to keep these cleaned, even long term. There's no waxing involved. There's no shampooing like there was for carpet. When we get this done, it's going to be a big saving to the district when it comes to personnel, costs, ease of cleaning, and we can actually, we don't need to increase staff to clean. We can actually keep the staff the same or even less to do more work. So we're pretty excited about this. Always going to try to do some HVAC upgrades. There's a lot of work to do in the district, but this summer we were able to. I'm gonna focus on the first one where the picture's at. We did boiler replacements at Longwood and May Watts. If you look at the boiler, it's a pretty small boiler, and it's a condensing boiler. We call it a jockey boiler, and it's different than the big round boilers you see in most schools. This boiler runs at it can run at very low temps. It can run at very low turn down, so it can run at 5% instead of 60%. So the savings are they're measurable and they're big. The beauty of it is it also extends the life of the existing boilers there because they won't need to be used as much. So this is a newer technology. It's been around for a few years, but we're going to be using these types of boilers in a lot of applications. The exhaust fan upgrades at the 3 high school gyms was a project that we started looking at with our engineering team and our performance contracting company and their engineers. How could we make the gyms more comfortable especially in the high heat days, which we don't have a lot of them in the fall and the spring, but we have some. But it can be 70 degrees outside, but you put 3,000 people and watch a football game or a volleyball game or an assembly, it can get really warm in there. Stratification of heat and such. So we put all 3 of the gyms. They're big. They're on different kind of frequency drives, so we can operate them at different. I can report to the board that the first 3 weeks of use has been a tremendous success. You talk to any of the high schools, and they will tell you that those gyms have been much more comfortable when they have big spaces. We're not using them every day. There's a cost, just like if you were air conditioning. We're going to use them when we have big spaces, a lot of people in space, or if it's very warm. But they are working, and we're pretty happy with how that's going. So we're going to keep an eye on that this year. Another one of my favorite projects was playgrounds. We received a grant from Representative Yang Rohr for $1 million. Matt asked me when I first came on board, how can we invest this money into playgrounds and improve all our programs? So we hired a new architect. They're a playground architect called Upland Design. We met with the school. I put on their school community engagement. It really should be the first bullet point because this truly was a community effort and a school effort. We had initial meetings with the principals. Once those meetings were over and we explained the process, he or she put a team together of community members, PTAs, their their staff, students, and we started talking about what was important to each community. And we had 4 different manufacturers of equipment. We let them choose from these 4 manufacturers anything they wanted. They put surveys out through the principal, and the principal asked questions like, what kind of slides do you like? Do you like this, the spiral ones or the long ones? And what kind of climbers do you like? And I wouldn't say that was the end-all decision, but it certainly drove what they thought about how the community wanted to see their playgrounds. They got to pick their colors out. I had no say in this. So if they're not happy with their playground, they have to look in a mirror. That's not me. We did 9 of them. They're beautiful. You can see, but just by these 5, that every one is different. Just to go left to right, the first one was Kalishaw. The second one, it was the first day of school, and as you can see, Dr. Talley there and Keely Schmid, the principal, cutting the ribbon for that new playground. The next one's Kendall. The top right one is Patterson, and then the bottom right is Longwood. So if you get a chance to go look at them, they're really fun, and very happy. We talked about some other projects that we did. We won't go through them all, except I just want to show you there's 2 pictures. These are both at Waubonsee Valley. The top right one is a football shed. It was a joint venture between Aurora, their procurement process, and the district. And then the bottom left one is for the baseball field. It's also the press box and storage. So that was nice. And then I didn't put it on here, but if you looked in front of the building and some other buildings, we did a lot of landscaping this summer. And I thought that was very important. I wanted to make sure that people show up at our buildings and they're proud of the fact that we care and they look nice. So this summer, I get to do it again. And we've identified $18 million for the summer. It's going to focus still on our deferred maintenance needs, which is great, but we've made a nice start to it, and other projects that'll support our long-term plans. So again, we're going to do flooring. We're going to do the 6 elementary schools where we did the gyms this summer, and then we're going to do an additional 6 gyms. So we can continue on until we're done. Paving, we're identifying 12 schools. Playgrounds, we're going to do 4 more schools. It will encompass 5 playgrounds. Roofing and masonry, 7 schools, and some more HVAC work. We do have some others that it's important to note that we're starting to look at more security items, doors, closures. Some of our doors are, Matt says our average age of our schools, I think they're 36 years. And some of the older ones, the doors just start to rust, they start to swell. Salt doesn't help, and we're going to start replacing these doors starting this year and all the way through summer. And I'm doing some HVAC work at some schools, and a chiller replacement at Nequa. So we've already engaged our architects and engineers, and they are working on these projects as we speak. We will strive to have bids out in the next couple of months. I'd like to bring projects to the board in November and the latest December. That's important. We've been getting earlier every year. There's been supply chain issues. Boilers are hard to get. They might take 6 or 8 months, so we want to make sure we get contracts to our contractors soon, and it'll avoid all these labor issues and supply chain issues. And with that, I'd love to take some questions.
All right, we'll start with Mr. Karubis.
Yes, thank you. To the building rental, slide 4. And to put this in perspective, we're bringing in $800,000 in revenue on a $422 million budget. So it's not so much the revenue that the program is generating. I think it is the fact that we are doing it, and just the community benefit about the fact that the schools have a rental program and partner with third parties, not-for-profits, other governmental organizations could benefit the community as a whole. So, kudos to continuing with the rental program. Obviously, there needs to be balancing of the costs and fees and the usage and the efficiencies of it, but just from a higher level. Following our policy 8:20 on the community use of our school facilities, and this is something we should continue to do and find other ways to do it. The number of projects, a lot of excitement I heard from the community. They got to see a lot of the things that were going on. Over the years we focused on some of the things that were more internal, more behind the scenes, electricity upgrades, not as exciting. But we're replacing the parking lot after driving into the same potholes, replacing the sidewalk after tripping on the same crack, and seeing the new playgrounds at elementary school. A lot of excitement. These were high impact improvements, I believe, from bang for your buck. Obviously, roofing is not as exciting. We've been doing a lot of patching over the years, so I was very encouraged to see us doing a lot of proactive stuff. Very important to have dry buildings in order to have efficient classrooms. So very happy that that was going on. And another, I've been spending some time in the concessions at the football stadium. And another topic is artificial turf. I'd like for one of you to speak on where we're at on the possibility of getting artificial turf at Wabanzi and Maple, and the replacement of the turf at the pit.
Sure. We know turf is a hot topic with many of our athletic teams, and we recognize we are, I think, the only school district in DuPage County that does not have at least one turf field for competitive high school events. I think at this point many schools have multiple, so we are behind on the turf fields. We acknowledge that. We've had some initial discussions with both park districts about trying to find a solution that would work and potentially have funding through whether it's a state grant or other grant process with for both turf at Wabanzi and Nequa. Don't have anything to report yet along those lines, but we're continuing to explore those opportunities. As JR mentioned, our real focus with both this past summer and the next summer is really catching up on a lot of deferred maintenance items. The turf is going to be recognized as part of our master facility project. It's going to be a high priority as part of that project. So if I'd say if we're unable to find a solution, again, through a grant or through another funding source in the next year or two, I'd expect we'd fund it through our master facility plan in either summer 2025 or 2026. So it's on our radar, and again, we're trying to identify a potential funding source for it, but haven't quite found that yet. And you are correct, we do have turf at one of our high schools, at Matea. That is nearing the end of its useful life. We're getting a little bit more out of it than we maybe initially expected. Some of that just with the year or two of reduced playing due to COVID has kind of extended that life, but similar timeline, we'll probably be looking to replace that turf field in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. Dumming.
Thank you for the presentation. I can only smile. Well, let me go to slide 3 first. I'll tell you why I was smiling. But slide 3, and Matt, I just have to say, I always love, bullet 2, and this time you said approximately, oh, I'm sorry, Mark. Approximately 1.4 times John Hancock Building. You always give us a great reference point. So whether it's football fields and this time John Hancock. So thank you so much for that. I love your different references for us. Slide 7, and a little different take, kind of what Board Member Karubis was alluding to is as far as us making our rentals available. But one thing that I really appreciated here, our tennis team came from Waubonsee, but I really appreciate not only seeing these improvements for our teams on campus, but this also impacts our public that can utilize some of our external facilities. And so, this impacts our public as well when they have opportunities to use those facilities when we're not, when our teams aren't on campus. And so I think it just serves as a reminder that this is a public benefit as well to me.
Yeah, we're excited about how these courts turned out. We were able to, those courts did have some lighting infrastructure that needed some maintenance to it. We've gone back and improved the lighting, so the lighting will now be available again. We expect in talking with Fox Valley Park District that they can find some programming that they'll be looking to use these courts for, and again, working with our schedule. So we agree with that. We did get that one just under the deadline, so there's still some landscaping and some sod that's coming in, and so we've been a little nervous about the public use after hours, but yeah, the next
2 weeks.
2 weeks or so, it'll be officially open for both our teams and for public use.
Understood, and yes, I saw that, and they're very, but they're very understanding. So, in 2 weeks from now, that'll be great. Let's see. Let's see. Slide 9. What did I want to ask about that? Oh. Thank you so much. You talked about the change out from carpet to flooring, and that, everything that you mentioned, but certainly that helps reduce, I would help reduce allergies as well for students and faculty. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity to hopefully see, a health benefit there. So truly, truly appreciate it. And then the only other thing Board Member Karubis brought up the turf. Later on, as you come back to us with that, I would love if you could share a little bit about turf versus real grass, when we look at that investment, and I get it that we're, one of only, or we're the last ones in but as well as from a safety standpoint, because I thought that, I don't know whether NFL or collegiate level, that there was some type of trade-off or potential benefit, and maybe I'm wrong, but there's some that do use grass, and so I'd love to see just a little bit of explanation on that turf versus grass from a couple of.
Yeah, I've done that before at a previous district. There are pros and cons to both, and there are going to be some people on both sides of the argument very passionate about it, but we will definitely talk about it.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Gantz.
I want to thank you guys. Honestly, I've had the pleasure of going to several of the schools that have had a lot of work done. And honestly, the look on the administrators' faces as they're showing everything that's been done and the pride, that they take in it, it's just amazing. And the fact that we're going to keep growing on that is wonderful. And I do want to echo Ms. Deming's comments about getting rid of the carpet in gyms. I think that's wonderful, and I do agree it might help a little bit with, allergies, germs, all of that. So, no, thank you so much. I honestly don't have any questions. I just wanted to say it was such a treat over the summer, driving around and seeing all the work being done. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing what we keep doing.
Mr. Rising.
Slide 5 really quick. I wanted to thank you because something I have heard repeatedly since we went to the building rental program is it was a very difficult process. So I greatly appreciate the business department and buildings and grounds taking a look at this and making it a little more clear and a little more efficient. So thank you. I know that'll make a great deal to mean a great deal to our community. And I've even heard PTAs, talk about things. I know you guys have heard their concerns and what they need as well. So thank you there.
They're valid concerns.
Yeah.
Our building rental application's 19 pages right now, which should be a little easier to rent our facilities than to write a college essay. So we're working on it.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And then I just wanted to kind of put some of this just in perspective. So our operations and maintenance expenditures yearly are about $30 million roughly. Now, keep in mind as a district, to the best of my recollection and knowledge, we've been underfunded as a district since probably about 2003, 2005. As I remember the last facilities study we did, they said we should be spending an average of about $12 million a year. For those 18 to 20 years that we were underfunded and continue to be underfunded, we were spending, if we were lucky, $4 to $6 to maybe $8 million at the highest. So not to be a downer too much, but the fact that we're able to spend $20 million this year on improvements on a $30 million budget, $18 million next year on a $30 million budget. But then when you factor in the 18 years that we weren't living up to our facilities, these things are amazing and great. But I also want to be a realist here and say this is a drop in the bucket of what we need to do as a district when we look at keeping our buildings that are now average age, 30, almost 30 years, keeping them up to date, making improvements to the classroom, improvements to the exterior, the interior. So I look forward to the study because it's going to give me a better historical picture of where we still need to go. While what we have done is great, but how much more we probably still need.
I think that's a great comment, and both John and I can probably have a lot we want to say towards it. I'll say realistically that the work we've started the last year or two and are hopefully going to continue as we adopt a master facility plan. Took us 12 to 15 years to kind of dig this hole, and realistically it's going to take us 12 to 15 years to get out of it. But we're starting, and you got to start somewhere, and I think that's what's been exciting about the work we've done the last year or two, and gets us really excited about the master facility plan and the comprehensive nature of that. So we're excited, and we had, as John said, he had fun this summer, but we do know this is probably 12 to 15 years to really get us back to where we should be.
And it should be 12 to 15 years, because if we try to do it all in 2 years, then in 25 years, it's all due again. So spreading it out is a good thing. And then we just got to make sure future boards and future admin, 'cause it won't be me, in 15 or 20 years, need to figure out a way to.
Mark will still be on the board.
Mark might still. Figure out a way to continue funding, because I'll just give you a quick example. Of the 4 million square feet we have, let's assume 3 million of it is under roof. And so if we need to do $3 million of roofs at $35 a square, that's $105 million. buildings. And if a roof lasts 25 years, it's $4 million a year that we just need to earmark every year just for roofs,
Yeah.
touching nothing else. And that's kind of how you build a budget.
Well, thank you, JR, and please, from this board, or at least for me, thank the staff that you had working with this, because this was no easy task that you guys did last year, and now you're gonna do it again. So.
Well, if you guys know Ken Schwal, he's been with the district 9 years. He's been a project manager for 9 years. He's got a lot of experience in the Naperville area. He's wonderful. And we hired a new gentleman, his name is Rich Searle, last year. And between the two of those guys, they worked every single day, Monday through Saturday, for 12 weeks. I think last Saturday was the first Saturday they did not work with contractors. So thanks to them as well.
Ms. Jane?
Just starting with what Board Member Rising ended with, just congratulations on being on schedule and being on budget. That is worth a huge party in itself, I think. I was curious to know, and I know you've mentioned this before, will all of our elementary schools have new flooring in their gym or a new playground eventually?
Yeah, those
that
are
the
both
plan?
those are both on about a 4 to 5 year timeline. So with the playgrounds, we did 9 last year. We're doing 4 this year. That'll get to 13. So we'll probably go 4 and 4. The plan right now is to go 4 and 4 to kind of close that out. And then flooring, we'd look at adding, again, 3 to 6 each year, doing the gym 1 year, and then the rest of the building the next.
That's great, yep.
And what is the life of usually the playground and the flooring generally?
Playgrounds, usually 20, 25 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Flooring, same, I mean, this new flooring is it's different than the typical square vinyl composite tile that you've seen in old buildings or in carpet. It'll last 25 years. It's, without getting in the weeds, it's 10 times tougher than regular tile. And obviously, it has better staying power than carpet. Not that carpet's bad. It's just, if you don't clean it frequently, which is really hard to do in a school, but when you put 600 kids on it, running through the snow and salt and mud every day, and you clean it 4 times a year,
Not enough.
that long.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, I appreciate that. Moving to slide 13 and 14 with our projects looking forward, I saw, let's see here, like as we're thinking about doors and our security and other projects, and I also noticed that we have to start the bidding on time to ensure completion. How are we synchronizing that time with our facility plan, and how are we managing that?
You want?
Again,
Yeah, I can take that too.
Yeah, again, part of the focus in the projects we've worked on both last summer and this summer is that we're making sure we don't conflict with that master facility plan. So we know paving's a good example where we know the master facility plan is going to. There's been no game changing to paving or anything. We're not going to be doing anything that really changes paving. So that's been a priority. Again, the flooring and is another example where we were so past due on flooring that needed to be addressed, and we know we're not interfering with a potential change as part of the master facility plan. So that's sort of that balance, right? We're cognizant that we are running on kind of 2 different tracks, and I joke with JR, when John started last July, I said, okay, on the one hand, I want you to spend the next 18 months to really understand our facilities and help build a comprehensive plan for the next 15 years, right? On the other hand, I need you to start today on the projects we're going to do next summer and the summer after that, because we have a lot of needs and we have a lot of work that needs to get done. So it's definitely been a balancing act. It does mean that some of our schools that are maybe in the most need, and I'm thinking specifically of Hill, Greager, and Waubonsie, We know that there's going to be some major changes potentially as part of the master facility plan, so we're staying out of those schools for this summer and next summer for the most part. So in some ways, it's making sure that we get a little bit to everything at the school, at every school, so that when we get to the master facility plan, we're able to really focus on 2 or 3 schools a summer, maybe only 1 school a summer, but really be all in on that school, and really have that school looking, completely different from head to toe by the time we're done with it. So I don't know if that.
Yeah,
got
it
your
does.
question.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Just one, you mentioned doors and security. Obviously, security is a big part of our master plan. It's a really big part. But it doesn't mean there aren't things we shouldn't be looking at this year. We probably have 1,000 doors on the exterior of our buildings, 1,000. Those cost anywhere between $4,000 and $10,000, depending on their doubles and what have you. And some of them, frankly, just need to be replaced. We want to make sure they close properly, so we're making an investment this year to start looking at maybe 50 or 75 of them. We won't look at them all in the future, but let's start now. Are there things we can do that just make sense that if we have some money? Security is a really big part of making sure our schools are in perfect shape.
Yeah, I think security may be the good example of that parallel path, right? So we know door replacement is something we can do this year that goes a long way towards security. We're also looking at improving camera coverage and starting to integrate cameras into all our facilities and adding a few more places and putting that on more of an integrated district-wide system. Those will be areas that then could potentially kind of be accelerated as part of the master facility plan. But then security's also got a pretty significant need, I think we're aware of, that to just improve the main entrances of our buildings.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to be a longer term item. That's something we can't do outside of that master facility plan, because that is a more comprehensive element. The design of that may be influenced by other considerations, educational space needs, different other changes that we're going to be seeing throughout our buildings. So, that's an example where, again, we can attack a couple needs that are deferred, that we know will not interfere with the master facility plan, while also starting to develop the big solution that'll be part of the master facility plan.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping to hear. So thank you so much.
Okay. Well, I think Mr. Kurubis brought up the word exciting several times. It's like this has been exciting. I was at the ribbon cutting for Brookdale, and you were there also, and the energy was just overwhelming. I think the best part too was the community input to all of the designs of the playgrounds and things. But even I went in the school and saw all the new flooring. I mean, they had carpeting that was original in there, and it's like I can't even imagine how gross that was, no matter how much you clean it. And how thrilled they were to just be able to pick out the gray flooring and pick out, I have all their rooms repainted and everything, and it was just pure excitement. And I think that it was time. I mean, it's really important that we made this investment this year, and it's something that we've starved for many years, and we can't continue to do that. And we'll have to do it this coming year too, because we have a lot of needs. We dug ourselves into a bit of a hole with our maintenance spending, and for many good reasons, but now it's time to start addressing that. And I really do appreciate your comment about the roofs. Like, you have to space this out too, because I don't want to do 1,000 doors costing $4,000 to $10,000 each in a 2-year period or whatever. It's like you have to put this out over a certain timeline, or you're going to have outrageous expenses when we already have a lot of struggle to make sure that we are paying our staff and making sure we have top-notch programming. And we want to continue to be viewed as a leader in the state of Illinois with our district, and this certainly is important for us to address. I also personally appreciate the landscaping work, because I can't tell you how sad it is when you walk up to a building, and even if the whole front entrance was redone, they still have scrubby, nasty plants. It just doesn't work for me or whatever. So it's like it's a small thing, but for me it's important. Back on the excitement thing too, I couldn't believe how excited people were about concrete or their parking lot getting redone. To me, those wouldn't be something that normally would generate a lot of, woo-woo, but I saw a lot of it actually. So it's like, I think people are seeing that there was a striking difference between what they had before and what it turned into. So it's like, that's good. I mean, people want their taxpayers to show, something that's important to them, and I think that's the reaction that I was seeing. So thank you very much, and truly appreciate it. It was a big job, and there's still a huge job in front of you, and we're all very anxiously awaiting that facilities study. So, yeah.
Well, thanks to you all for the support, because it
Yeah.
makes my job a lot easier and more fun if you guys support me.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it was fun to see the Wabansie tennis team here. I mean, you had to feel
was
that
great.
in your heart, too. Yeah.
I'm gonna go watch them practice tomorrow and thank them.
So, thank you.
Ms. Donahue, if I can just say just a couple of things. Tonight, we had a budget presentation. We talked about capital improvements, and we talked about transportation. If you think about all of that, it forms a wonderful triangle. And in the triangle would be the instructional program. And so you cannot have the instructional program in place without those parts of that triangle that support it. And so we are very fortunate to have the people we have in place to make sure that those three areas, add food services with transportation, that all of those things are working so that we have outstanding instructional programming. The last thing I will say is all of this, we have to remember, is tied to possible funding. And so we have to be mindful of that as we go forward with all of this. The first day of school, I was at Brookdale, and the floors came in on purpose because we had a student who got sick. Big difference when you have carpet and when you have tile floor, how you can clean that up much
Yeah.
faster.
I think we can all imagine that. It's very visual. Yeah.
It's part of life, people. It is.
All right, so our last topic is legislative advocacy and Board of Education update. Mr. Rising, do you have?
Yeah, just really quickly. So if you remember all the way back to January, where I told all of you I was going to work with IASB to talk to ISB about proficiency and better clarifying what proficiency is and what proficiency isn't, because there is a misunderstanding in the community. And then we had a turnover of the executive director of IASB. The new executive director, Kimberly Small, reached out to Lori and I this past week. Just historically, Kimberly had her kids in our district at one time. I think they may have even graduated from our district. She does not live in our district anymore, but so she has a history of knowing us. I've known her for many, many years. She reached out to Lori and I, along with the deputy director, Jeremy Duffy, just to give us an update on proficiency and letting us know that there was a IASB, ISBE, Illinois Association of School Boards, and Illinois State Board of Education advisory meeting where they were going to be discussing this. It was going to be a topic of conversation. So she was making us aware of that, and in the process asked if we would like to join that. Lori and I discussed it. We had a tight timeline because the meeting was today. I joined the meeting in effort of our further advocacy at the state level. What I will tell you is that it was the executive director of IASB. It was about 10 districts in the state. The districts that you'll know, there was a CPS school board member there, Elgin, Naperville 203, and then the rest of them were either from southern or central Illinois. About 10, and then Dr. Sanders, the new state superintendent, was there with his whole cabinet. Now, what was discussed, and there was topics, multiple topics, teacher shortage, literacy plan, proficiency, swatting and social media, and then mental health and trauma. A lot of these things are frequently discussed. A lot of these things, Dr. Sanders updates the community. But this was just kind of a opportunity for the group of people that were there to voice their opinions, but more or less it was just an update from ISB. I took a couple pages of notes. I will get those to you by the end of this week so you can just see them. Again, I will, those meetings only happen, I think, once every quarter, so they're not much, but going back to, what we discussed as a board and what Mr. Krubis said as multiple times is we need to think about expanding our voice at the state level. So I think it's good that we have a seat at the table there. And I'll let you know as I hear things, but yeah, I just wanted to give you the update and if you guys have any questions.
So Mark, was this an opportunity to share our thoughts about proficiency?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so.
In the list of things that you covered?
As Kimberly was telling us it's gonna be an advisory meeting, I said, okay, can you tell this? And I summarized my 6 pages, like literally into 2 sentences.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know what? Why don't you join us and just say this, So I did exactly that. I complimented Dr. Sanders because he tried to address it in his first newsletter. I was very encouraged because if you remember me telling you, there was many on the previous cabinet staff of the state board that, not that they didn't understand proficiency, but they may have not had the historical knowledge of the 13 years of proficiency. Every single person on his cabinet now has an understanding of proficiency in depth, or has recently been in education, administrator, or superintendent. So I was extremely encouraged about their knowledge, their thought process. They said this isn't going to be a quick process, but it's going to be a continuous process of better defining, clarifying, and fine-tuning the understanding of what proficiency is around mastery and growth and that type of thing. So some encouraging things, and I'll hear more, I'm sure, in 3 months when the next meeting is.
Yeah, because Mr. Rising had in his 6-page write-up detailed out the history of testing and proficiency in the state. So it was like a extremely helpful document if people hadn't been around or exposed to that level of understanding. And it's a really important topic for us. So, all right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Rising, for doing that. All right. I need a motion to close the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes. All right. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay.